Netflix has some top-rated content. They have loads of original shows that are really brilliant. Great shows, documentaries, and even comedy specials. But recently, a number of Netflix comedians have gotten in big trouble and had major controversies. We'll get into some of those controversies and explain them a little bit. What was the story with Dave Chappelle and his comments? What about the allegations against Christy Elia? Let's get into it. The Dave Chappelle comments. Not going to repeat the things that Dave Chappelle said word for word because there have been enough people who have already been hurt by his careless comments. He used these comments as jokes, and while I am a firm believer that comedy is allowed to push boundaries, when you hurt a whole community with your words, and you should know better. He had a lot to say about the trans community. First, he defended J.K. Rowling for her transphobic comments, and then he went on to call himself a TERF, an acronym that stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. Like I said, he had a lot to say on the subject, and none of it was nice. He also told what he believes is a joke about a fight he had with a lesbian. Right through his set piece, he kept referring to her as a man, and then he went on to speak about gender and how he believes that gender is a fact. Like I said, I'm not going to repeat everything since many of his words were very hurtful and very insulting. But many people took note and things blew up about the new show. He had said similar things in previous shows, even admitting that trans people hate him for his comments. But that sure didn't stop him from moving forward, double down on those comments. What have others said? Many people have spoken out against Dave Chappelle and against Netflix for allowing this comedy special to stay on the streaming service. Even some people who have worked with Netflix have said that they might never work with streaming service again thanks to this controversy. Jacqueline Moore, the showrunner for Dear White People, had a thread about the situation and how hurt she was by Netflix and their continued support for Chappelle. She explains how hurt she was that Chappelle said that people should be mad that a trans woman won Woman of the Year, or by all the times he had purposefully misgendered and more. But more so that Netflix thinks it is the type of content to put out and celebrate. She went on to remind people that she shared the story of her own transition for Netflix and that I was her home with her show. That there are still a lot of people in the streaming service that she loves and loves working with to create art. But since they allow people to speak up on trans people not being real, knowing that many trans people are targeted for hate crimes, then she has to be done with them. She even shared that she was crying while watching the special, and she is by no means the only person who spoke out against it. The backlash. Chappelle himself has said that the movie he made was invited to loads of film festivals that are held in the United States. But after the controversies surrounding The Closer started to gain momentum, these film festivals started to uninvite him. The only company who has not distanced themselves from the comedy special and comedian is Netflix themselves. They've kept supporting the show, it seems. Employees and the Netflix co-CEO. But it wasn't just the public or those that work on Netflix shows that have said a lot about the entire situation. There are employees that are in the LGBTQ community that have shared their dismay about how Netflix has handled the entire thing. Netflix software engineer Tara Field tweeted about this special and how Chappelle attacks the trans community and the very validity of transness, but how they weren't supposed to take offense. Field and two other employees apparently tried to get into a meeting about the situation, but they were reportedly turned away. Then they were said to have been suspended by Netflix for tweeting about the situation. But then the suspension was lifted the same day, and Netflix has denied that it ever happened in the first place. They released a statement that said that their employees are allowed and even encouraged to disagree with the company. But Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos responded with an internal email to employees asking how they would repair the situation of allowing harmful content to get on Netflix. Sarandos said that they wouldn't be removing the show even when pressured. He pointed out that Chappelle's previous show is Netflix's most watched and award-winning stand-up to date, and that was also controversial. He went on to say that Netflix is committed to inclusion, and that's why they make a wide variety of shows that show different lives on screen. So what has Chappelle had to say about his recent controversy on his new show? Has he apologized? Vowed to change? His response is coming up soon. Then we'll also be checking out the allegations against Christy Elia and much more. Let us know your opinions on this situation in the comment section. Other comedians' comments. There have been other Netflix comedians that have been asked to comment about the situation. Michael Che, for example, also has a new stand-up special on Netflix, and he's no stranger to controversy himself. He has loads of comments that have gotten him in his own issues. He's also continued to call Caitlyn Jenner Bruce Jenner in some pieces, but afterwards he did apologize and said that that he didn't know that dead naming was a thing. He has a bunch of other comments that angered people too, so with all that plus his new Netflix show, it was just a matter of time before he'd be asked about the Chappelle controversies. He seemed to start defending his fellow comedian by saying that he is a friend who he admires a lot, but then he backed off, saying that he doesn't want any trouble or to get involved. Did Chappelle comment? Oh yes, he did decide to offer a response to the entire situation, but it wasn't exactly what you would call an apology. In an Instagram video, he shared his side of things. He said that he wasn't against the community since everyone that he has known from the community has been loving and supportive. And then he said that he doesn't know what this nonsense is about. He went on to express how grateful he is for Ted Sarandos and Netflix for being the only ones that weren't willing to cancel him just yet. And then he went on to address the transgender community directly. He agreed that he was willing to meet with them, but he'd have his own conditions. In his own words, I am more than willing to give you an audience, but you will not summon me. I'm not bending to anyone's demands. Such a heartfelt, lovely apology, don't you think? Moving on to Chris D'Elia. Okay, let's move on to another Netflix comedian that has been accused of some really horrible things. It started when he was playing an entertainer who exploits kids on the hit Netflix show You. That's when things got complicated for him because some young women started to tweet about how ironic that is since he is reportedly a comedian who exploits young girls in real life too. The first Twitter user to accuse him, Simone Rossi, said that D'Elia started to groom her when she was 16. After she came forward, a number of unverified Twitter accounts shared stories about the comedian inviting teen girls to meet up with him after his shows, and more accusing him of asking him to send them photographs and sending them explicit messages while they were underage. There were a lot of comments, and it even prompted Penn Badgley, star of the show You, to respond and comment that he really hoped that his show was not a haven for predators. The fallout. This time Netflix did react straight away. Chris D'Elia was set to host a prank show on Netflix, and the idea was dropped straight away. He was also dropped by 3 major talent agencies, and he lost a bunch of upcoming roles that he was already cast in. He was pretty much effectively canceled. And it turns out that that was probably a good thing since he has since been hit with a child porn and exploitation lawsuit. D'Elia's response. Eventually, D'Elia owned up to having issues with sex and having a prom, but he has still maintained that his encounters have all been legal and consensual. Still, he did admit that there were way more messages than those that came out in social media. He said that he got at least 50 messages that he did a show, and he replied to them all, hooking up with many of them. His lifestyle and the fact that he had access led him to cheat. At the time of his apology, he seemed sincerely sorry, but he's recently returned to comedy and has started using the accusations and being canceled as material for jokes, making his apology a bit less believable. What are your thoughts on these cases and canceling people in general? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.